Okay, so when there's a coefficient in front, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it out as a GCF, but only out of the first two terms. I'll show you why in just a second. So I'm going to take the 2 out, and I'm just going to put the plus 3 over here. I'll come back to that in just a minute. Okay, now I'm going to proceed just like before, so I'm going to half this. Okay, and square it. So the number I'm going to add is plus 9. Except I didn't add 9 to the equation. I added 2 times 9. I added 18. So in order to keep my equation equaling 0, I'm going to subtract off 18. That's probably the number one mistake that students make. Okay, if you have a coefficient out front, when you add your number here, you have to make sure you multiply those two numbers and then subtract off that amount. All right. The second most common error is right here. You remember to write that as your perfect square and you lose the 2. The 2 is actually really important. It talks about the shape of the parabola, which we'll talk about in the next video. All right, so there goes the 2, and negative 18 plus 3 is negative 15. All right, now I'm still having to solve for x, so I'm still going to use some algebra. I'm going to add 15 to both sides and then divide by 2. So that gives me x minus 3 squared is equal to 15 divided by 2. All right, and that's because I added the 15 divided by 2. Now I'm going to square root both sides. Okay, and we're going to have to worry about rationalizing the denominator there. I'll talk about that in a minute. So on my left-hand side, I get x minus 3, and my right-hand side, not forgetting the plus or minus, I have plus or minus root 15 over 2. But I'm going to write it as root 15 over root 2. Because we don't like square roots in the denominator, I'm going to rationalize my denominator. So I'm going to multiply right now by 1, which is the root 2 over root 2. Okay, and I talked about rationalizing denominators in a previous video as well. So my right-hand side of my equation is now plus or minus root 30 all over 2. Okay, and I can't simplify that radical. It has nothing that will jailbreak, as it were. I should put an equals there. All right, so now I'm still solving for x. I'm going to add 3 to both sides. I will get x is equal to 3 plus or minus root 30 over 2. Now, in my opinion, that's a completely final answer that's lovely. But some teachers like that all is one fraction. So an equally correct answer would be to change this so that it has a denominator of 2, that is 6 over 2, which is the same as 3. In which case I would have 6 plus or minus root 30 all over 2. All right, it doesn't matter to me which way you leave your answer, but it might matter to your teacher, so make sure you check with them. But make sure, if you were doing it this way, that it's clear that it's 6 plus or minus root 30 all over 2, not 6 plus or minus 30, and then the 2 is maybe under just the root 30 or maybe under the whole thing. Make sure your answer is crystal clear, okay? So it's either going to be 3 plus or minus the root 30 over 2, or it's going to be 6 plus or minus root 30 all over 2, all right? So let's do one more of those where there's a coefficient out front. Because these tend to be a little bit trickier for students. And then I'll do one where we do fractions and the coefficient and the whole thing. And it's kind of an ugly question, but I want to make sure, like I said, that I do at least one. So this is 3x squared plus 6x minus 1 equals 0. All right, so I've got a coefficient up front. I'm going to pull the GCF of 3 out of just the first two terms. And I'm going to create my fraction like so. Okay, now I'm going to divide that in half, plus 1, square it, which will be still plus 1. But remember, I haven't added 1 to the equation. I've added 3 to the equation, 3 times 1. So I'm going to subtract 3 over here. So don't forget the 3 out front. This is created factors to this. Negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4. All right, and now again I'm solving for x, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides, divide by 3. Okay, and then I need to square root both sides. Okay, on the left-hand side, I'll have x plus 1. On the right-hand side, I'll have my plus or minus. I'm going to go ahead and square root my 4, because that'll just be 2, over square root of 3. I'm going to rationalize my denominator, so I'm going to multiply by 1. And that gives me x is equal to, sorry, on this side, I'll have plus or minus 2 root 3 over 3. I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides in order to get my x. So x will be negative 1 plus or minus 2 root 3 over 3. Or, if you write it all as one fraction, you'll get x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus 2 root 3 all over 3. Okay? Again, doesn't matter if you leave your answer this way or this way. Double check with your teacher. Okay? And I'm going to do one last example where things kind of get tough. So this is one where when I pull out the GCF, this is an odd number. So we're going to deal with fractions. We're going to do the coefficients. We'll do it all. Here we go. Number 5. All right, I wanted to do one example that kind of is the ultimate difficult, if you like, in completing the square. So this one, when I pull out the GCF, the middle term is also going to be a fraction. So here we go. So if I pull out the 2 as my GCF, I get minus 3 halves x. I'm going to move my minus 4 over here to keep it out of the way. All right. So I'm going to half my 3 halves. That'll be 3/4 and square it, plus 9/16. All right. But remember, I didn't add 9/16. I've now added 2 times 9/16, which is 9/8. So I'm going to subtract off 9/8. All right. And I'm going to not forget my 2 here. All right. Changing this one so that they have common denominators. This is the same as 32/8. So negative 9/8 minus 32/8 should be negative 41/8 equals 0. Okay, I'm going to add 41/8 to both sides and divide by 2 or multiply by 1/2. So that gives me x minus 3/4 equals 41/16. Okay, I'm going to square root both sides. Alright, that'll give me x minus 3/4 over here equaling plus or minus root 41 over root 16, which is 4. Okay, and then I'm going to add the 3/4 to both sides. That gives me x equals 3 plus or minus root 41 all over 4. Because they have the same denominator, I can write it all as one fraction. Okay, so that's about as ugly as it gets, and you can do it. So we will, in the next video, I will do solve by completing this, in the next video, I'll solve by using the quadratic formula. See you soon.